WadjetEye are a developer that have been around for over a decade, almost entirely focusing on story-rich point-and-click adventure games. They are probably most well known for their Blackwell trilogy, which started back in 2006. However, they didn't pop up on my radar until I discovered the 2011 release, Gemini Rue, while searching for something to scratch my cyberpunk itch. Since then, I've been working my way through their catalogue, which so far have all shared a consistent level of storytelling, art style, with fitting changes in themes and mood. The latest outing from Wadjet comes in form of Unavowed, which from the trailer quickly establishes itself as a much darker narrative, filled with demons, magic and choice-driven character interactions. When the game begins, we are thrown straight in mid-scene to a disembodied voice angrily baiting an unclean spirit to a scorched sky cityscape backdrop. It becomes apparent rather quickly that we are the one he is referring to, as we are prompted to choose our response to his accusations.
As wax melts before the fire, so shall you be driven away, unclean spirit.
He doesn't appear to want to listen, however, and demands to know whether we are from this realm or of human gender.
Silence.
What you choose here will dictate your gender for the remainder of the game, and lifts the veil off the characters that were previously silhouetted. We get a good look at the situation as our film noir inspired staff bearer tries to call out the demon residing within us, before blasting us with a bolt full of lightning.
You are human, remember!
Had I not been recording footage at this point, I probably would have spent about an hour staring at the text box trying to think of the perfect name, but as it was raining in the game, I just went with Rain, with an E.
You hear that, evil spirit?
We are then prompted to speak something about ourselves, namely our profession. We are able to choose from actor, police officer and bartender, and what you choose here will set up your backstory for the chosen character, as well as personality traits that will come into play in dialogue trees. My initial playthrough was helmed by the female police officer character, and I will be focusing on her story arc from here on. I will try to keep spoilers about this path to a minimum, but as with most adventure games, there is only so much you can talk about without revealing plot points or puzzle answers, so just be warned you will find out a few things that you might not want to, if you want a completely vanilla experience.
Fight it! Remember who you are!
Anyway, a few more lightning blasts throws us into a flashback from a year ago, where we arrive at Staten Island to every goth's favourite hangout, Club Eternox. We are straight into our chosen role and backstory as police officer, responding to an incident call from inside the club.
Alright, this is the place. Just one thing before we get going. I want you to take point. You think you're ready?
We are accompanied by our partner Vicky, who instructs us to take point, effectively handing over the gameplay from here on out. This is where we get our first proper taste of the world we interact with. As you might expect, everything is controlled solely by the mouse. We have an inventory bar that appears when we move our cursor to the top of the screen, and hovering over artifacts and NPCs will bring up text description at the bottom. Items can be interacted with by using the left mouse button, and that's pretty much it. There is no archaic text parser in the game, so dictating what actions you can perform is done automatically, and these are displayed by a small icon which appears in the middle of the cursor. You will have to employ your first logical step by using your police badge in your inventory to gain access to inside of the club, after cycling through a few dialogue options.
Looks legit. About time you guys showed up.
When inside, it is quickly established that 3 suspects have been detained by the on-scene cop, and we go in alone to investigate, whilst Vicky stays downstairs to have a bit of a chinwag with the owner. It doesn't take long to discover that something doesn't quite sit well with the current situation, which becomes ever more apparent when our fat officer friend pulls out his book of Jedi mind tricks, brainwashing Vicky into forgetting the whole thing.
It was like something out of a Bruce Lee movie. You should recommend me for a promotion.
Things go from bad to worse as the book takes a liking to us and we proceed to headshot our way out of the nightclub. There is something quite unexpected about seeing non-exaggerated violence in a game that adopts this kind of 2D art style. It makes it far more effective. Once we are done with our slaughter, we are back to the present to witness the exorcism of the spirit that resides within us. This prompts the character who we learn to be Eli being struck down by a bolt of lightning.
The hands you control will no longer do your bidding. In the name of myself, my witness, and the soul whom you hold captive, I cast you out! Gotcha!
Eli!
Control of our character is resumed and we head downstairs to be treated to some appropriate scenes of destruction, alluding to what our character has been getting up to in the years since the flashback. As expected, questions about how the events came to be are initiated, but in the interest of not waiting around for the police to show up, we escape out the back exit.
Fresh air at last.
In true adventure game fashion, things aren't quite so simple, and we are thrown into our first logic puzzle in form of sourcing something to break off a lock. It won't take a few minutes to explore the small scene and discover what can be interacted with, and before long you'll have collected and placed a few items at your disposal. But the world of Unavowed is littered with the supernatural, and our simple puzzle is cut short by a skinless looking creature who reports to have been summoned across the void. He isn't best pleased, and we are left to our own devices as to how to deal with the situation.
Creature, who are you and what is your purpose here?
Purpose? You invited me.
The easiest solution, of course, would be to stove his head in with the pipe. But as we are not the most stealthy of police officers, this results in us getting our face bitten off. The more convoluted and pleasing method of dispatch comes into play, and he is appropriately taken down. We decide to let our demon friend go. However, he is too weak to make it back across the void. Fortunately, he feeds on the flesh of humans, and the building we have just exited is scattered with corpses, giving us our first moral choice in the game.
Only on this plane of existence. I do not believe it has a choice.
Do we give the supposedly innocent demon the energy he needs to get home and rob the families of the dead the chance for closure? Or do we slaughter the being that only turned up due to our summoning?
Ugh, I'm gonna be sick.
Rise, creature. Eat your fill and be gone. A new life.
Regardless of your choice, Eli and Mandana will welcome you into the titular Unavowed, and you will wake up the following day in their headquarters. Here, you will have a good opportunity to get to know the characters better. Mandana is first seen forming from smoke out of a nearby bottle. Working your way through the dialogue options, she will explain that this is down to being a djinn on her father's side. You can also pry for knowledge about the Unavowed, which she informs as being peacekeepers stretching back for thousands of years. Eli is down in the basement throwing fireballs and will allude to his fire mage origins. There is not too much dialogue interaction at this point, and each character will encourage you to move on and meet Kalash, who resides in the front room. Kalash is large and in charge, and will provide you with a review of your last mission before pointing you in the right direction for the next one.
I am a djinn of the ancient kingdom, and I run this branch of the Unavowed.
In the first instance, you'll be sent to the East Village near Astor Place to investigate some void activity. From here, the game takes a mission-based approach, having you complete one in its entirety before returning back to headquarters to review, converse with your party members, and debrief on the next outing. Each mission in the game follows a similar structure. You will arrive at your location and have a small number of streets to traverse, buildings to explore, and NPCs to interact with. Speaking with NPCs will be your first port of call, as they will usually provide you with a brief backstory of their presence, along with fueling any answers to get you pointed towards your objective.
Where are you taking me?
Dialogue with NPCs is imperative, as gathering information from one character will allow your knowledge of the situation to grow, in turn opening up new dialogue trees with other characters.
Wait, that name sounds familiar. She has a young daughter, a budding little artist type?
That's right.
Aha, now I remember.
It is classic detective work through interrogation, and the back and forth required between characters helps to uncover facts and plot points organically, opposed to handing you everything on a plate. As the premise for each mission gains ground, you will acquire the necessity to further explore your surroundings, which will often lead to logic puzzles for you to overcome. These are part and parcel of any point and click game and range from simple, such as acquiring a key to unlock a door, to something which requires greater thought like solving a riddle or working out the password for a computer. Solving puzzles will gain you access to new areas or provide valuable information and items needed to progress to the end of a mission, which will reach its apex with a rewarding supernatural explanation with moral decisions to be made as to how the situation is resolved.
I am tired. You will not let me rest. And now you want more? Well, I refuse. That is my right.
That is a really basic overview of Unavowed's premise and the structure of gameplay progression, but ultimately, the appeal of the game will be down to story, writing, and how it keeps your attention. As the game is mission-based, you'll be introduced to a new scenario, location, and a small number of NPCs to interact with each time round. Each mission story is quite unique, though it fits in appropriately with the universe the game builds, and relates tangentially to the game's underlying plot.
Yeah, you got me. Detective Sam Durkin, Midtown South.
I was a little bit concerned at first, due to the small size of each location you visit and the scarce number of NPCs you interact with, that this would be more of an anthology of short fantasy stories masquerading as a coherent narrative. However, this is not the case. Each NPC you interact with is well characterised and doesn't play up too much to any particular archetype as to make their involvement with the short story they sit with obvious, and they are also well realised enough that their existence doesn't feel out of place in their surroundings. This is helped by some very competent voice acting, which paired with a detailed variety of character portraits with ranging emotions, alongside the retro style font, manages to give the conversation weight.
How about I take a picture of this to show your dad?
No, it's not right yet. Just 5 more minutes.
Okay, for real this time.
They are also written well enough that the responses they give to questions stick to a believable persona and don't reveal a plot point arbitrarily, so it is down to the player to provide logical questions and evidence to further the story along. As the missions last around about an hour each, depending on how much dialogue you wish to explore and how long it takes you to figure out where to go next or how to get past the puzzle, there isn't extensive unnecessary amounts of dialogue between one-off characters. Everything is generally to the point, which helps to alleviate them outstaying their welcome.
Isn't that your name too?
It's Elliot.
I don't want to ruin the plot of each individual mission and story, but they all competently balance their fantasy aspects by having them affect the characters involved in a logical, almost domestic way. Not all new information is sourced through dialogue, however. You will often find notes, emails and plot appropriate items such as receipts and lists to further your progression. Looking at items and reading documents helps to break up the dialogue in the game and make you feel more like you're a detective. However, these are often few and far between, so your inventory will never be too overflowing with clues. This is a shame, as some of the more interesting puzzles require you to review items and try and figure out something that you might have missed. On the subject of puzzles, they are a tad on the easy side. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, as nothing breaks a good narrative like being stuck on a nonsensical hurdle, and the game never resorts to moon logic, but I did at times find myself getting stumped by simply overthinking a puzzle, which did help me find this Easter egg, and decipher this Chinese symbol. I think it says murderer. So the mission stories are enjoyable and fairly easy to run through with the puzzles at hand, but what makes Unavowed stand out from similar titles is with its main party of characters. After a few missions, you would have recruited 2 new members to your team in form of Vicky, who it turns out was only previously wounded from the shooting at the Eternox nightclub, and Logan, who can talk to dead and is bonded to a small ghost girl, KK.
It keeps out any spiritual energy. I've got something similar in my lab.
You do?
Sure. When you're experimenting with unstable magic, it's smart to be behind a protection circle.
Each mission begins on a subway train, allowing you to choose 2 party members to come with you, though one of these has to be either Eli or Mandana, which makes this interesting as each character has unique ways of interacting with the world.
What do you mean?
She's not actually standing on the floor, right? So what's keeping her here?
Mandana is a djinn and has the ability to know when someone is lying, along with having a massive sword which she can use to open certain locks or cut someone into pieces. Eli is a fire mage, and as you would expect, has the ability to burn things. It also allows him to fire read, meaning he can channel energy to read documents that have been previously burnt to a cinder. Vicky doesn't possess any supernatural abilities, however she has a gun, which often comes in handy, and police connections which help in dialogue trees.
You'll get yourself shot!
O ye of little faith.
And then we have Logan, who can talk to ghosts which may be scattered around the level, and KK, who can investigate certain paths that we wouldn't be able to traverse. This makes choosing your starting party an interesting stab in the dark, as the first time round you won't know what hurdles you are going to come up against, but the game is designed in such a way that there is always an alternative method to achieve the end goal, depending on who you have brought with you. It does mean that if you see a ghost and didn't bring Logan, you'll have no idea what they had to say, and you will have to rely on everything around the uncontactable character to assume their involvement. This not only adds replayability, but also helps to give extra heft to the missions that on the face of it seemed quite small. Where your party really shines is with their characterisation. Each one is incredibly well written, Eli being the standout of the bunch, and they all have subtle character arcs that by the end of the game really make you feel like you've progressed with their inner demons. What complements the characters so well is the mission content. What is clever about Unavowed's writing is that while this is a supernatural detective mystery at heart, each mission acts as more of a staging device to explore each of our party's personalities, turning it more into a character study of each member's past. It is very subtle at touching on aspects of their life, such as Logan's alcoholism, Vicky's expectations as a member of a cop family, or Eli's children.
Stop the fucking boat!
There are opportunities to question them between missions, but intrusive prying is often cut short, meaning that there is actions that you need to take during the game itself to help reveal the characters.
See you at the next meeting, I guess.
There is also your own story to uncover, which is the baseline all of the individual mission stories sit on and follows the pursuit of the spirit that possessed you. I don't want to reveal too much about how the narrative goes, but your character arc is based on the decisions you make, and these are most impactful at the end of each mission. Due to the nature of your work, you will inevitably stumble across a trapped soul or troubled demon.
Oh my god, my power's in the hands of a total idiot.
Using this fire elemental as an example, he lives in constant pain in our realm, and we have the choice to end his life, which would be a slow, agonising process, or we can send him to a fire realm where he can be with his own kind, but as he used to be human, he won't fit in with their society and could live forever as an outcast. This genuinely had me stumped for quite a while as which way to proceed. In the end, I sent him to the fire realm with the hope that at some point in the game I would get to find out how he was getting on.
The flames are self-sustaining. You aren't on fire, you are fire.
Each one of these decisions that you have to make holds the same weight, and it is to the game's credit that it made me consider my actions rather than just choosing arbitrarily. So the game is incredibly well written, but it doesn't come without a few flaws. I mentioned previously that the puzzles are a tad on the easy side. They are also lacking in numbers. The opening scenes have you reconfiguring the layout of an alleyway to set up a trap for the demon that shows up, but nothing to this extent is ever touched upon again. The closest we get is rewiring a sprinkler system so that a door opens, but this won't take more than a few seconds to figure out. It would have also been nice to explore more of the other realms, as I found these to be massively more enjoyable to traverse than some of the LA settings. There is one mission in particular which allows us to pass through mirrored objects and team up with the embodied ghost of KK. This was really interesting, but only lasted for one short mission, which I feel like it was a bit of a throwaway concept. There is also some instances where characters will awkwardly stand in front of interactive objects, which can obscure them from your view, causing you to miss them the first time round, and as there are only one or two selectable things per screen, you wouldn't often think to go back and do much pixel hunting. These are only minor flaws though, and they can be disregarded as the game's focus is on letting you experience the story. There are a few other things worth mentioning. The hand-drawn art style is brilliant, and paired with a great soundtrack, it really helps to set the mood perfectly. There isn't too much animation to be had here. This is helped by the pretty consistent rain setting, which gives the illusion of movement, but for the most part, characters are pretty still whilst dialogue plays out, and there isn't any mouth animation.
Physical form. As long as I live, it will remain encased in crystal. Face me in combat. Kill me, and the crystal will break, granting you what you desire.
Unavowed is an accomplished story told incredibly well. All of the lore and protagonist characteristics are uncovered naturally, and by the end of the game, you will have a real connection with everyone that you have with you. From a gameplay perspective, it's pretty basic. There really isn't an incredible amount to do other than dialogue, and the only NPCs that you will talk to will be necessary to progress the plot, so you'll probably hit every mark that you are supposed to in order. If you are looking for a vast head-scratching puzzle game, this one probably isn't for you. However, that isn't what Unavowed is trying to be. It falls more into the category of a choose-your-own-adventure visual novel, which whilst it isn't exciting from a gameplay point of view, is incredibly engrossing if you are after a story and characters to get lost in. My first playthrough took me just under 10 hours, which if you consider the possible 6 combinations of starting characters, along with the moral choices and limit on party members you can take to each mission, gives you a lot of replayability, not to mention the developer's commentary for good measure.
It's all I can do to stop myself from racing down to Wall Street to check on the kid.
Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought about Unavowed if you picked it up, and if you want to hear me waffle on aimlessly about films, you can find a YouTube and SoundCloud link in the description below to the movie talk through podcast I do with Dan, Plotcast UK.